Hey, if you want to discover how to tell powerful marketing stories that captivates people's attention and ultimately gets people to buy your products and buy your services, stick around and watch today's video through until the very end, as I'm about to share with you the 3 reasons why your stories probably suck, and most importantly, how to fix those problems so that you can make way more money leveraging the power of story selling. With that said, if this is your first video, my name is Misha Wilson, and over the course of the last few years, I've now done over $25 million in total sales with story, and the power of story being literally the pillar behind every single sales message we've gone ahead and used. As always, if you get value out of this video, don't forget to let me know in the comment section below what your biggest takeaway is. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon notification button so that you're notified when I do more videos just like this. With that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Welcome to the Misha Wilson Show, where we show you how to create massive success online so you can enjoy the lifestyle of your wildest dreams. All right, so I want to talk about the 3 biggest problems and mistakes that I see so many people make when it comes to telling stories that absolutely kill conversions, essentially make your story something that people don't even want to listen to, and ultimately lead to 0 sales. All right, so I've used story selling, storytelling, and just about every form of story in my marketing, from stories on webinars, stories in video sales letters, stories in email follow-up campaigns, stories in one-off emails. Just in general, I've used stories, for the last 7 years in my marketing career, more than just about anything else, in order to go ahead and sell. And I've also had tens of thousands of students that I've tried to train, and I have trained certain ones on using stories in their marketing. And what I found is that these are the 3 biggest mistakes that people make with their stories. And these are mistakes that happen very often. All right. So these are things that are very repetitive for our students, and also something that I think a lot of people have a really hard time or a difficult time wrapping their heads around how to fix these issues. All right. So the first biggest mistake with storytelling, and I understand why, but the first biggest mistake is making the story all about you, the marketer. All right. So look, I understand usually you're telling a story kind of about you, right? You're telling your origin story. You're telling a story about you using a various product that you might be selling. You're telling a story about, not maybe you, but maybe a client success using your product. Or you're telling a story about you getting super resourceful in order to create a state of resourcefulness within your prospect. All right. So with all of those different examples, and there's 15 different kinds of stories on top of those that we could tell, with all of those different examples, we are essentially kind of telling stories about either ourselves or stories about, our prospects, or our students who have used our strategies in order to create success. Right? And so the natural tendency for a lot of people is to essentially just tell the story in the context of themselves. Now, the problem with that is if your audience can't relate to the story, if your audience can't understand that you are telling the story about yourself, you're telling a story that you experienced, but you are telling it because it is relevant to them, it means nothing to them. All right. It means, literally 0, and it won't do anything for you and your marketing. And so the key is that you want to structure your story in a way where ultimately, ideally, you start out in your story in the exact same place where your prospect is. And you describe the situation, you describe the struggles, you describe the pains, you describe the fears that you were feeling, that you were facing, that were present in that situation. And when you describe that, they are literally the exact same pains, the exact same fears, the exact same situations that your prospect is in right now. All right. And then you want that story to lead your prospect to essentially where your prospect is wanting to go. All right. So when I tell my story of going, from being $10,000 in debt, kicked out of 2 different houses I was living in, unable to pay my tiny $380 rent bill, practically homeless. Though, unfortunately, for a lot of my customers, they're in a tough situation financially, right? They're trying to make money online. They're trying to learn how to make money online. And so that story resonates because that's where they are. And those are a lot of the various situations that they are facing. And then the story leads them to where they're wanting to go. All right. So I don't say, I broke through and then I started playing tennis more often, which I have done, right? I've started playing tennis again, but I don't say that. I say, I broke through, I created success, and now I can travel the world with my laptop. I can work from wherever I want. I have total freedom. I have financial freedom. I never stress about money, et cetera, because those are the desires that my prospect has. All right. So understand that even though you are telling a story about yourself, even though you're telling your story, you have to make it specifically relevant to your prospect. And if it is not specifically relevant to your prospect, they will not care. Rule number one in marketing, it is never about you. It is always about them. It is always about your prospects' wants, needs, desires. Always frame your stories in a way where it makes perfect sense and it is crystal clear to your prospect, again, why you're telling the story. All right, so that's point number one. Now, mistake number two, I should say, that I see so many people make is not getting vivid enough with feelings, thoughts, and emotions in your story. All right. So if you're just kind of telling, the story of, hey, I drove myself in debt. I almost got kicked out of the house, but I figured out how to do this. And now I'm successful, right? That's not super compelling. But if I tell the story of, God, I remember going up to the ATM machine and trying to pull out $380 from the ATM, and I put in my card and it came back and it said insufficient funds. And I remember feeling, my stomach just kind of drop. And I remember slumping my shoulders forward and realizing that I was gonna have to go back and tell my best friend that I couldn't afford my tiny $380 rent bill. And then if I tell the story about, telling my best friend that and him telling me, sorry, man, you gotta go. I love you, but you gotta go. And if I can share, firstly, the feelings and the emotions that I was experiencing when that happened, and then also if I can share the dialogue that was back and forth, right? And this is the same with, if you tell a story on a webinar, in a video, in an actual email, whatever the context is, this holds true. If you can add more specificity with what was said, how you felt, how the other person felt in the story, what the consequences were of, the action that you didn't or did take, etc. The more specificity in regards to dialogue, how you felt, how other people felt, consequences, etc., that adds life, that adds color, and that ultimately adds realness to the story. All right. So when you tell a story, don't just make the 30,000 foot view. I got kicked out of the house. And after I got kicked out of the house, I ended up being successful. And now I make money. Tell people the experience. Tell people what led to the experience. Tell people what was said between you and your roommate, in my example. Tell people how you felt when, God, I put my freaking credit card into the machine or my debit card into the machine and I didn't have the money left. I didn't have the money for rent. My world completely and totally just kind of came shattering down in that moment in time because I realized I just broke an agreement with my best friend and I felt like a total loser because I couldn't figure this out, right? Feelings are what ultimately drive connection. And if you don't share how you felt, if you don't share with people and bring people behind the scenes in your story, they won't have any impact. All right, so that's the big mistake number two. And then big mistake number three, very simply, is that a lot of people tell a lot of stories that don't have a freaking point. All right, so look, you have to have a point for every single story you tell. And ideally, every single point you want to make, you want to tell a story. And that's kind of the formula, right? So when you share a lesson, tell a story. When you tell a story, have a freaking lesson. All right. People don't get on webinars. People don't listen through videos, whatever it might be, to hear a story about you, right? You don't tell the story of, getting kicked out of your house and then becoming successful for no point, right? In that context, I could have a couple of different points in there. I could have a point where I tell in that story, even though I was $10,000 in debt, I ended up going further in debt. I got resourceful in a time of limited resources. I invested in a mentor, and in getting resourceful in a time of limited resources and in investing in a mentor, I was able to create success. I was able to then have the support system, the coaching, the mentorship to break through. And now I live my dream life. And then I can tie it back in so you see the value of getting resourceful in a time of limited resources, and you see the value of having a mentor. All right, so that's just a very quick 15-second story that, literally illustrates 2 points in a crystal clear fashion and ultimately gets to a point, right? So the worst thing you want to do is bore your audience talking about you, not making it about them, and then also not having relevant lessons within your content. And when you do that, you essentially set yourself up for your audience never wanting to tune in again, your audience never wanting to pay attention to you again, your audience looking at you as the person who just talks about yourself, and your audience looking at you as someone who doesn't know what they're doing. All right, so look at your stories. Realize that these are the big mistakes. Make stories relevant to your audience. Use, share your emotions, share dialogue that happened to your story. Get very kind of crystal clear and explain and show people what it felt like within the context of the situation within your story. And then at the same time, always have a lesson that your story actually tells, all right? Or your story goes ahead and reinforces. Use these 3 principles, tell badass stories that actually make sales, and go ahead and grow your business. With that said, if you got value out of today's video, as always, don't forget to let me know in the comment section below what your biggest takeaway was. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon notification button so that you're notified when I do more videos just like this.